Tonight, one of the most astonishing financial stories of recent times.
I've never seen anything as extraordinary as this happen before.
It was sheer panic. It was sheer panic in London, in New York, but all over the world.
A high-stakes thriller in which the German carmaker Porsche took on the financial markets and won, making billions.
At the moment, Porsche definitely looks more like a hedge fund than a car maker.
While some hedge funds lost a fortune.
People there was no color in their faces. They were really white.
This is the most deadly situation, the nightmare scenario for any hedge fund manager. Minute by minute, they're losing more and more money.
And running through this tale of fast cars and even faster money, Porsche's audacious plan to take over its giant rival Volkswagen. Tonight on the Money Programme, how Porsche crept up on Europe's biggest car manufacturer and in the process cost the city billions of pounds. For years, Porsche, the sleek and super-fast sports car, has been the must-have accessory for the successful city trader. But Porsche doesn't just make the ultimate fast car. It's been exposed as a key player in one of the most audacious city stories in years.
Porsche, the maker of the 911 sports car, has accumulated Volkswagen shares over the past 3 years.
We're also waiting on Volkswagen as well. Its shares have been firing and misfiring like an old banger this week.
Porsche has gone from being a city boy's trophy to a city player, involved in a gobsmacking attempt to take over a rival 14 times its size, Volkswagen. It all started in October 2008. Over 2 days, the price of shares in Volkswagen soared. Briefly, it became the most valuable company on Earth, worth £237 billion. The rise defied logic. Every other car maker in the world was struggling in the credit crunch.
You can see hedge funds losing between sort of 10 and 40 billion euro.
But then the truth came out. Porsche had a massive stake in Volkswagen shares and had, in effect, cornered the market.
If this were to have happened in the UK, then I think there is a strong case that this would have been deemed to have been market abuse.
Porsche deny any wrongdoing, but the German regulator is now investigating suspected market abuse. I want to unravel this astonishing financial tale. My first destination, the German city of Stuttgart. Porsche is announcing its profits for the year up to July, before this autumn's events. Porsche's chief executive, Wendling Wiedeking, brings astonishing news. Remember, it's a small car company making very expensive sports cars, things that just don't sell as the world heads towards recession. And yet, today, it's reporting record profits. At Wiedeking's side is his chief financial officer, Holger Harter. Together they have an audacious plan, the takeover of its much bigger rival, Volkswagen. Remember, this is a car company, but it turns out Porsche is announcing record profits from trading on the financial markets.
Eine zweistellige Umsatzrendite erreicht und sind darauf auch stolz. Gehen Sie davon aus, dass diese
The money made from the old-fashioned business of making and selling cars is dwarfed by its share dealing.
Just 1 billion of their profit comes from actually selling cars, but 6.8 billion from making bets on VW share price. But in Germany, there's more kind of, I would say, a more proud view of a southern German car maker making really nice products and being also very clever in their financial strategy.
Other car makers are begging for government bailouts to keep going. But Porsche no longer relies on four wheels to keep it in profit. So what kind of company have these bosses created? I met up with world-renowned expert on the car industry, Garel Rees. He says when Porsche boss Wendelin Wiedeking arrived in the early 1990s, the company was close to collapse.
Porsche was in a very difficult position when Wiedeking came on the scene. They had just had a dreadful period at the end of the 80s and the early 90s. So the recession that hit then in 1991 opened up these tiny cracks into massive fissures in the case of Porsche. And there were real questions whether Porsche could survive.
The new boss slashed production costs and brought in a new range of models. By the early 2000s, he'd taken the company into a golden age.
He really is driven by the numbers. His very, very focused approach on making sure that the bottom line has to be dripping in black meant that, frankly, Porsche entered a period of prosperity, the like of which they, and very rarely, any other car maker had been in.
But despite the profits, Porsche is still tiny, and car technology is incredibly expensive. The company needs hybrid engine technology and modern electronics to flourish. So Porsche decided to use the cash from its profits to attempt something remarkable: a takeover of Volkswagen, a company 14 times its size, with all the high-tech hardware that Porsche could ever need.
When we talk about Volkswagen, we don't just mean Volkswagen. Remember, this is Europe's biggest car maker, and it owns some of the biggest names in European motoring. There's Seat, Skoda, Audi, Lamborghini, Bugatti, and of course, Bentley.
The plan wasn't just ambitious, it was the biggest gamble in Porsche's 80-year history.
It's quite ridiculous. A company that had really never made over 100,000 cars of their own at all, thinking they could take over a company that made over 4 million vehicles. It's like a sparrow knocking out a hippopotamus.
Volkswagen and Porsche have always had a strong historic link. In the 1930s, before he founded his own company, Ferdinand Porsche designed the Volkswagen Beetle, the most important car in Germany's engineering history. His family still own Porsche.
The Porsches look at Volkswagen as almost their inheritance. If anybody is going to take over Volkswagen, it's going to be them. It's going to be Porsche company, the Porsche family.
So Porsche homed in on Volkswagen to ensure its own future and get the company for the family. In 2005, it slipped silently into the dangerous waters of the financial markets and began to hunt down Volkswagen shares. It was a risky business, but Porsche was good. Very good.
Because they've got contracts and they've got people to look after and they can't really
The company was growing in wealth and in power without anybody noticing. Arndt Ellinghorst is a car industry analyst, specializing in Volkswagen and Porsche.
Porsche has developed from being a small piranha to becoming a big shark, and that's the painful lesson that all of us in the financial market had to learn over the last couple of years.
But Porsche didn't have enough cash to gobble up Volkswagen outright. So it used financial devices like cash-settled options to gamble on the price of Volkswagen shares. Do it right, and when share prices are rising, it lets you buy shares in the future, but at today's price. Porsche made huge profits, which it then used to buy up even bigger chunks of Volkswagen.
In 2006-2007, they reported roughly 3.5 billion euros in gains from Volkswagen options. In 2007-2008, these were more than 6 billion euros.
When Porsche started making money on Volkswagen shares, did the culture of Porsche start to change away from being a car maker?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, the core of the business is still producing cars, but these cash-settled options that we talk about had a purpose, and the purpose was to increase the stake in Volkswagen at the cheapest and most efficient price, and that's what they obviously did in a very smart way.
By September, Porsche had successfully acquired just over 35% of Volkswagen, an astonishing feat for such a tiny company. While it was buying more and more shares, the rest of the car industry was crumbling.
President Bush has offered a $17 billion bailout to two of America's car giants. The short-term emergency loans are...
From America to Japan, the car industry was thrown into crisis. Car sales plummeted, jobs disappeared, and share prices collapsed as investors abandoned an industry on the brink. It's still happening. 2 weeks ago, Nissan announced 1,200 jobs would be going in Sunderland. Yet back in the autumn, while the rest of the industry was in financial freefall, the price of Volkswagen shares stayed stubbornly and surprisingly high.
In the world's financial centres, investors, especially those hedge funds, thought they saw the chance to make some easy money.
It seemed obvious that Volkswagen's high share price would have to fall eventually, and many investors decided a bet on this was as good as printing money.
This is Curzon Street in the heart of Mayfair in London. It's nicknamed Hedge Fund Alley because so many fund managers like to have their offices around here.
All a hedge fund is an investment fund that can invest in any way it wishes.
Justin Urquhart-Stewart is an investment manager in the city.
They operate in a rather dark area of the city in terms of how they like to invest, quite quietly, quite secretly. So they've had a bad press because most people don't actually know what they do. Are these people the warlocks of the city who are out to try and ruin us all, or are they trying to make the best for their investors?
More and more hedge funds sniffed the chance to make a financial killing by betting that VW shares would plunge. Alexander Pesco runs a fund in Mayfair.
It was sort of obvious to anyone who'd been in the business for a long time that there was a big misvaluation in place because the shares of VW were trading at a huge premium to the other companies in this sector, whether you compare it to the European car manufacturers, the American car manufacturers, or the Japanese manufacturers. It was trading at maybe 20 times earnings.
In other words, hedge funds thought Volkswagen shares were overpriced and would soon fall. To place their bets, the hedge funds used a process called short selling. It's key to the astonishing series of events which were about to unfold. We asked our city insider to explain how it works.
So if I was a hedge fund manager and I wanted to go short selling, this is what I'd do. First of all, I've got to borrow the shares. There are 10 shares which I've been able to borrow from some of the institutions. Now I can actually try and sell some of those shares. And I know that these are £10 a share. So I'm going to sell these to the markets for £10. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm going to get £100 back. £100. What I'm going to do now is wait. Because as far as I know, these shares are going to go down in price. So we'll just wait and see until that happens. In fact, it has gone down. It's gone down to £5 a share, so I can go and buy them back. So I shall now buy these shares back. And at £5 a share, they're only going to cost me £50. There you go. All I've now got to do is return the shares and pay a fee for the privilege. So there are the shares, there's the fee, and look, I've now made a profit of £40. That's not bad for not doing very much.
It really is that simple, but it's a very, very dangerous game.
There's some huge risks in actually operating in a short-selling market. For one thing, you might not be able to buy the shares back, but heaven forbid, something worse can happen. You've sold the shares and then the share price doesn't go down, it goes up. So you've then got to go and buy them back at a higher price. So now you've made a huge loss, totally against what you were originally expecting to do.
So the autumn's financial crisis deepened, but Volkswagen's share price still didn't fall like other car firms. In Frankfurt, a few analysts began to speculate someone had secret control of VW shares. And they suspected that as long as that someone didn't sell those shares, the price couldn't fall. A journalist went public with these suspicions.
On the 17th of October, we published a theory
about what actually is happening with VW share price. Basically, the heart of this theory is that that Porsche bought a lot of, or secured itself a lot of more options on VW shares than the market has thought.
Daniel Schaefer reported speculation that Porsche had used cash-settled options to gain secret control of almost all of Volkswagen's shares. A company doing this in Britain would have to go public, but under the German rules, they don't have to.
Basically, what they did was a kind of creeping takeover, which means that they left the markets in the dark about when they were going to do the next step, and through the use of options, nobody would really see them increasing their stake.
20% of Volkswagen shares are locked away, owned by the state government of Lower Saxony.
Now, if Porsche, let's say, controlled 75% of the shares, that meant they would have cornered the market in VW, which would explain why the price wasn't dropping.
When I called Porsche and told them that we know of this theory, they immediately dismissed it and called it a fairy tale. When I asked them about, okay, if this isn't the truth, what is the truth then? They didn't give me another explanation.
This is Germany's stock exchange, the Börse. When it closed on Friday, October the 24th, Volkswagen shares were worth just over €200. That weekend, on Sunday afternoon, Porsche dropped a bombshell. It revealed it owned or had options on over 74% of Volkswagen shares.
So I received the email and sort of gave it a cursory glance, and then sort of did a double take like you see in sort of Tom and Jerry movies when they go past the scene and then kind of pan back, and then called a couple of people to see what they thought, and sort of quickly realized that Monday morning was going to be pretty explosive.
The hedge funds who had bet that Volkswagen's share price would fall realized they had got it terribly wrong. Worse still, they had to find shares to replace those they'd borrowed to make their doomed bets. Yet Porsche seemed to have locked up most of the available shares, and it wasn't selling.
The markets are shut on a Sunday, so you can imagine what happened here in the DAX at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. The market went absolutely wild as traders chased the few remaining VW shares.
We were really shocked. People there was no color in their faces. They were really white, and it was, you know, when you're really shocked, you have no answer for those questions, and that was exactly the situation. You know, I'm working with the stock market for 25 years. I never saw that before.
To stem their losses, the hedge funds and other desperate investors fought over the remaining shares that were available, offering higher and higher prices.
Before Porsche made their announcement, Volkswagen shares were bumbling around €200 to €400. Then on Sunday, they dropped that bombshell. By Monday, VW share price exploded. Look at that. It went from around 400 to over €1,000 each, making it briefly the most valuable company in the world.
Well, on Tuesday morning, the share price went up from 450 to 1,000. Increasing Volkswagen's market cap by an extraordinary amount. And then all the people sort of involved in the situation, whether it's the regulators, the index trackers, the exchanges, started to panic.
It was sheer panic. It was sheer panic in London, in New York, but all over the world. Everybody wanted Volkswagen shares, but there were no shares around. So that's why the share price increased step by step by step, and even further, because there was no liquidity and everybody trying to buy.
Hedge funds who'd borrowed Volkswagen shares to short sell had to buy them back and return them to their owners by a given date, or their losses could be unlimited.
This is the most deadly situation, the nightmare scenario for any hedge fund manager, where they've got a position and they find they then can't close it out. Not only can't close it out, but the price is going further and further away from that. Say, minute by minute, they're losing more and more money. And so they've got to find a stock to be able to close it within a given time. So this is exactly the same as Cinderella trying to get home before she turns from riches back to rags.
Porsche say the chaos its Sunday statement provoked was a complete shock. No one from the company would agree to an on-camera interview. But some hedge fund managers, like Alexander Pesco, suspect the funds walked into a trap.
I think we need to determine what actually went on behind the scenes and whether Porsche, as they're being accused by a number of people, was actually manipulating the situation.
Do you think Porsche knew what it was doing?
I think for them to pretend that they didn't know what they were doing is hard to believe.
Porsche insists its secret stake in Volkswagen shares was part of its takeover strategy and not for profit. It says it didn't cash in when the Volkswagen share price was at its very height. But on the third day, with VW's share price still riding high, Porsche did start to cash in some of its options and free up the market. It said it wanted to help the hedge funds still chasing Volkswagen shares. These helpful trades also made Porsche billions of euros.
There was a great transfer of wealth from the hedge fund community to Porsche.
For everyone who is in the market, they are professionals and they know what they do.
What would you say to the hedge funds and the people who lost money in this? Tough?
Tough. They had a bet and that was a wrong bet.
But privately, hedge funds tell me it's not as simple as that. They want to know if Porsche orchestrated the whole thing and therefore manipulated the market.
I imagine there's going to be a lot of activity from American hedge funds who got burned, who like the legal system, who are quite litigious anyway. I think they're going to use this opportunity to chase Porsche, and there's going to be a sort of forensic examination of everything that happened. And, it's as yet to be determined.
The hedge funds, who have been in touch with city lawyer Darren Fox, are waiting to hear what the German regulators have to say about why Porsche made the statement that triggered the frenzy in Volkswagen shares.
If I was the German regulator, I'd be looking at a number of things. I'd be looking at the internal communications that led up to the making of the statement to see whether there were people emailing each other internally about the likely impact of making the statement. The real key question here is why make one then? And was the intention to make the market transparent and efficient and orderly, or was it to do the opposite?
One of the allegations is that Porsche wanted to create panic in the market.
If it's the case that the motivation behind making the statement was to avoid the share price dropping to where it naturally and rightly would have gone, and the intention behind it was to create the panic that ensued in order to drive up the price, then that is a problem, yes. That's potentially market abuse.
After spending 10 years with the Financial Services Authority as a regulator, Chris Rexworthy now advises investment managers on the rules in the UK and Europe.
I've never seen anything as extraordinary as this happen before. What the German regulators have got to wrestle with is whether Porsche's activity amounts to normal market practice or not. And it's almost certain that if the German regulators do decide to bring any case against Porsche, you will have one set of expert witnesses lined up against another set of expert witnesses in the court, taking opposite sides of the fence.
We asked the German financial regulator BaFin to comment. It told us that it had immediately started an investigation relating to suspected market manipulation. But as the investigation was ongoing, it couldn't say any more.
I find it difficult to believe that Porsche wouldn't have known the impact of what they were doing on the marketplace.
Despite its denials, there are still questions about Porsche's share trading motives. This was the key point that dominated Porsche's November press conference.
Dr. Wiedeking, hello, my name's Max Flint from the BBC. I apologise for doing this in English. What about the allegations that you misled the financial market?
Dr. Wiedeking asked his finance director to respond.
Davon überzeugt sind und auch fest davon ausgehen, dass wir die Finanzmärkte nicht getäuscht haben. Ich meine, wenn wir diese Diskussion jetzt losführen...
Herr Harter told me Porsche was, quote, convinced it had not misled the financial markets, and those who'd lost money had only themselves to blame.
...einen Squeeze-out gemacht haben. Und das sind Möglichkeiten, die ein Kapitalmarkt bietet, und die haben wir auch genutzt und mehr nicht.
Many hedge funds feel a sports car maker has beaten them at their own game. More humiliation for an industry that's already feeling the pain of the credit crunch.
Well, obviously, hedge funds, which perceive themselves as very, very smart investors, and which they are normally, have been bitten pretty badly by a small piranha in this case, namely Porsche.
Hedge funds aren't the only losers. 2 weeks ago, one of Germany's best-known industrialists killed himself. Adolf Merkel had lost over £300 million of his personal fortune betting on the Volkswagen share price. And the Volkswagen affair may have affected many of us.
The thing to remember here is that hedge fund managers manage money that ultimately belongs to pension funds, insurance companies, endowment funds, charities. And so ultimately the people that have suffered are ordinary people through a drop in value of their pension funds, for example.
Well, I don't think hedge fund managers will be rushing out to buy new Porsches anytime soon. I mean, Porsche in the last 12 months into July, made 6.8 billion euros from trading derivatives, options, the like of which created this very dangerous situation with the stock. And they made 1 billion euros from selling cars. So is Porsche a car manufacturer or are they a hedge fund?
I think at the moment Porsche definitely looks more like a hedge fund than a car maker. But I mean they're still actually making pro sports cars, and some say really beautiful and really nice sports cars. So the very heart of the company is still a sports car maker.
Porsche is now moving up through the gears to complete its takeover of Volkswagen. Since October, it's used more of its profits to buy yet more Volkswagen shares.
There's no doubt that Porsche emerges as the winner from all of this. We don't know how much money they've made, but we do know they've made enough to buy another slice of Volkswagen, taking their total holdings in the company to more than 50%.
Porsche and its boss, Dr. Wiedeking, say they soon plan to own 3/4 of Volkswagen shares and remove the final legal obstacles to a complete takeover.
I think Wiedeking is looking at a very clever survival strategy, and he's doing it at the right time. In other words, when you're at the top of your game and you're making a fortune, that's the time to take these sorts of decisions, not when both of you are in a mess, because 2 drowning men do not make a swimmer.
For the moment, Porsche may have the reputation of being a smart financial player who happens to make sports cars. But if it takes over Volkswagen, it'll become the 3rd largest car manufacturer in the world. It looks like the fast bucks will keep on rolling.
Making sense of the financial meltdown. If you've missed Evan Davis and The City Uncovered, watch the series so far via the BBC iPlayer.